We are going to go to 6.8, our 11:30 a.m. item A, consideration of the County of Lake acting as lead agency on a planning grant application under the Community Resilience Center grant program and the California Strategic Growth Council. And B, consideration of resolution approving the application to apply for up to $500,000 in grant funds under the Community Resilience Center Program of Strategic Growth Council and of the California Department of Conservation. And C, consideration of a letter of commitment and authorize the chair to sign. And I'm going to turn this over to our Chief Climate Resiliency Officer, Terry Logson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Board. I'm very excited to bring this item for your consideration. I have a little presentation that I adapted, well, it's mostly the Tuolumne Resource Center, Community Resource Center. The County of Tuolumne got funding before this grant program. They patched it together. So I wanted to run through it a little bit. This particular map that you see is something that I had to create for the grant application, and it doesn't list everything, but you will see that there are a number of place markers, and what they stand for is locations within the county. When we began these discussions, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, knowing this funding was coming down, was what trusted facility is in every or almost every community in Lake County, and that is the senior centers or community centers. And so this particular grant, the way that we have framed it is a hub and spoke model. And so these are each of the spokes that will be served by a future hub, which is the Upper Lake Senior Activity Center, the Lucerne Alpine Senior Center, the Live Oaks Senior Center in Clear Lake Oaks, the Spring Valley Community Center, the what's the full name for the Clear Lake Senior Community?
Highlands.
I know it's Highlands Senior Activity or
Senior Services Center.
Senior Services Center, thank you. The Middletown Senior Center, the Middletown Boys and Girls Club, which is operated by the Middletown Rancheria, the Little Red Schoolhouse, the Kelseyville Senior Center, Lakeport Senior Center, the Silvera Community Center in Lakeport, the Lake County Fairgrounds, and Galilee Lutheran Church. And Galilee Lutheran Church came into this conversation because one of our partners in the grant, which is Pastor Shannon Kimbaloff, who is with Red Cross, works with them, and that was the first location of our pilot Neighbor Fest, and they were very interested in what we were discussing for this planning grant. And what this planning grant will do is we're going to look at each of these facilities and find out what needs they have to upgrade their facility to serve as a cooling, warming, or clean air center. And it could be, some of the senior centers have very strict contracts, so they can only be open to serve their population. Some of them can be their activity centers, and they've expanded, like Clear Lakes, where they could theoretically serve the entire public and perhaps be an evacuation shelter or an overnight shelter. Right now, that's not what we're looking at for any of these facilities, but what we're looking at is a place where it's neighborhood level, because so many of our members of our community don't have reliable transportation, so you need someplace close if you want to get out of the smoke, and if you want to cool down, or if you want to warm up. You want to go someplace that is trusted, familiar, and it's already in your community. And then the long-term project is what we envision from what we toured in Tuolumne, which is a standalone community resilience center that has office space so that it's sustainable. There's people who are renting the office space that are going to provide services. It will have a warehouse. It will have meeting rooms. It can serve as an evacuation shelter. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so this is the facility that we looked at in Tuolumne, the top one. So that is in the city of Tuolumne, and the bottom one is in the city of Groveland. Next one. And so just a little bit of the background, they went through this, the Rim Fire in 2013, and this grant program wasn't put together. They gave feedback to the state, but this is some of the types of the funding and what they needed to do to get funding and put it together for these resiliency hubs. Next one. And so this is just an overview of some of the funding that they needed and they used to address their biomass issues that were imperiling the community. Next slide. And then a list of questions that they asked the community. You can go to the next slide. So what they really said was ask the community, talk to the community. And so the way that we have put together this grant is primarily for a consultant who will do that work and work in coordination with myself to make sure that it happens. And so Groveland, their facility, the community wanted it to have a primary focus on serving their elderly and seniors. And the Tuolumne Center wanted it to be, because it's right downtown in the middle of Tuolumne, to focus on families. And it has a swimming pool outside. They offer college classes. You can go to the next slide. The next slide. I think this is mostly this. I just wanted to make this information available to yourselves and to the community. You can go to the next slide. So what it mentioned on the previous slide, you don't have to go back, is a community stakeholder advisory committee. The way that we're setting this up is that stakeholder, that advisory committee will be a subcommittee of the Risk Reduction Authority. Because we have representatives on the RRA that serve everywhere in Lake County. The fire protection districts have their contacts, the water purveyors have their contacts and boards, the tribal nations have their members and services that they provide. And so having a subcommittee, it doesn't have to be of the RRA members, but it'll be a subcommittee of the RRA who can help guide this. You can go to the next one. And so this is just the layout, the floor rendering, but we did a project, not a project, an exercise when we toured the facility to talk about what we wanted for Lake County. And one of the major things that we need is warehouse space, and neither of those had warehouse spaces, but we know from going through all the disasters we've gone through is when supplies and come into the county, we need one place for it to go, and then it's distributed around. And that's how we came up with what we call the spoke and hub model. This freestanding facility, you can go to the next slide, and the next one. This freestanding facility will have the services like they have on this list, the Amador Tuolumne Community Action Agency, which for us is North Coast Opportunity. They're our community action agency. They have a local college that does online courses. Their HHSA provides services there. They plan to have a kiosk for their community development and planning department so that people can go in instead of having to go to the courthouse to get permits. And then other types of services like OES or just a community services unit office. Next slide. And so again, that's what the outside looked like at Tuolumne. Next slide. Isn't that nice? That's Groveland at night. Yeah, you can just click through these. I just wanted to make it because it was such an impressive feat that they were able to pull together. And the facility, they purchased the land from the Tuolumne Band of Miwok Indians, and then the tribe gave property for the parking lot, and that's at Groveland, for the Tuolumne facility. And both of them they're beautiful and brand new. And they have clean air, excellent ventilation, which you need in these pandemic times, as well as we all know, during dense smoke events. So that is just a little snapshot. So what we're applying for is up to $500,000 for a planning grant. The idea, well, I'll go back. There's 3 stages for this grant. The first is a planning grant, and then there is the second level, which is resource, forget what they typically call it, and then the third one is implementation, where you actually build. And it's a very long process, is what we heard from Tuolumne, to make sure you have the community on board. Also, in the second stage, they do not allow a lead applicant to apply on behalf of facilities that you do not own. And so there's a good, what we looked at is that each of the facilities, say for instance, the Live Oak Senior Center in Lucerne, that's not a county-owned facility, but what we want for them to have is a strategic plan so that they can seek funding, but they know what they need to do to upgrade their facility. I don't know how many times we've heard, oh, how many shovel-ready projects do you have? It's like, we don't really have any shovel-ready projects because we never have the funding to put the plan together. And so that's what we're seeking for this. And it could be on the next round that we bring in other county-owned facilities, such as I don't know what it's called, but at Russell Rustiki Park in Lower Lake, there is a facility and it has a kitchen and it could use some upgrading. The town hall in Lower Lake, it may not need too much. Leased facilities that behavioral health has, right now, we have to have control of them, and maybe a lease would do that. I think it would. But there are other facilities that the county own that we can look at to do that upgrade. And so we're excited to identify a location for a brand-new CRC and get feedback from the community near and far who will be utilizing it. And so I hope that your board will approve and authorize the resolution to apply. Also included in your packet was something that was required for me to submit on the grant, which is this local climate change snapshot. And I didn't intend to go over it, but I included it so that the public could have it. It's heavy reading. And then there is a letter of commitment from the county which lists time, dedicated time for myself and Wendy to work on this, basically liaison with the consultants and direct them, invites and setting up community meetings. So I hope that your board is excited about this project as I am, because it's something that's very much needed, and I know we'll get the grant.
Terry, thank you so much for your leadership in this. We've been having weekly meetings with all of these partners for the last couple of months, and then we got to go on the field trip and be truly inspired by what's going on in Tuolumne. And their resilient centers are so successful. They are this year applying for more grant funding to build more of them out in the remote areas of their county where they still have people that are underserved. And you did give us that climate data, which is hard to look at, but it's our reality. And it is our responsibility to harden our communities and make sure that we have resiliency embedded at the local level. So these hub outlets will be community-led and designed, as will the spokes will be, and then the hub will certainly be. But the idea is that we're turnkey ready for any event that comes our way any time of year, because we know it doesn't really matter what season we're in. The lights go off, the air gets smoky, low snow, heat wave, whatever happens, it all happens to us here in Lake County. So thank you so much. And Supervisor Crandall,
Yeah.
do you have your pen up?
A couple of things. One is, I know at the Lucerne Alpine Senior Center, we own that, but we lease it to them. Is that still how it goes, or I thought we leased it to them. Yeah. Something like
We own
that.
the thrift shop.
Oh, it's the thrift, that's right, it's the thrift shop, sorry. The clubhouse in Nice, it's owned by us. It used to be the Lions Club, it's right behind Keelan Park. Back up, just in case that might be something. It's got infrastructure problems. It used to be on one of our project lists back in 2019, but we reallocated that funding to the Lucerne Harbor project, so it's kind of just sitting there, open building.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and they have been so important to our conversations. Every week, they've been showing up. Yep. Supervisor Spatier?
So I did have two questions that automatically popped up. Number one, the map that you provided are prospective locations where enhancements and upgrades can be done once this planning grant is done, and then we acquire more grant funding or other funding to throw at those facilities. I'm looking at the way that Tuolumne kind of went through their process where they built 2, and we're looking at like 12. What's our way of prioritizing? Because if we try to do them all, then I feel like we're not going to get much done in comparison to if we isolate what is the priority areas. Is that something you're planning on looking at as you go through this planning process? Just because it looked like we're doing a jack of all trades rather than expert of one type of thing. And I just wanted to check in to see what your thoughts were on the way that you're going to process this.
Right, that's a really great question. So initially looking at this, the idea was to make each of those sites what is typically called a community resilience center, which is like the one we viewed in Tuolumne. However, a lot of the senior centers said, we can't be open to the public. We cannot, and we certainly don't have staffing. We don't have training. And so this is what we want to look at. We're not going to fund them to become like that building in Tuolumne. What we want is the county to own a freestanding one that can serve all of those. So that's why it's a hub and spoke model. The hub will be this freestanding facility. Through this planning grant, what we're hoping to find is locations, possible locations, to look at all the zoning, to look at what is needed infrastructure-wise. Is there, all of those things that you would look at when you're planning a facility, and then go for the next level where we would look for designs, pinpoint down, do more community. But for the senior centers, and like for instance with the Lake County Fairgrounds, we all know that they tend to be the incident command for CAL FIRE for incidents. In most places, when you are evacuating your livestock or animals, you take it to the fairground. Our fairgrounds don't have that capability. And so we want to get a plan so that the fairgrounds can go for funding, and I can help look for funding for them to be able to have it, because we need the fairgrounds to be functional in that regards for livestock and animal evacuations.
And so this actually came up last winter. We were looking at a grant for the fairgrounds, and this would apply to any of the satellite spokes. Here is a funding opportunity where we can apply to get the fairground built out to be exactly what we need to do. But you had to submit the plan.
Right.
And we didn't have the
didn't have the
plan.
plan.
And there's no money for the plan, and there was no time to develop that plan. So that's what's in this planning grant, is to get all those satellite spoke facilities a plan and support so that they're ready to go and they can get that funding. It's not all going to come out of this. But we have been supporting those facilities with our ARPA funding and getting them things we need. And so every chance we get, we're going to try and get them, upgrades to be sustainable. But that strategic plan is so necessary for each of those properties.
And I don't want to say I disagree, but I think that the funding that we have supported them hasn't necessarily been with the idea of this. It's been the idea of what services are you already offering, how do you help continue it, whether you're doing Meals on Wheels, whether you're doing senior center activities or things like that. This is a little bit more specific.
It's specific, but we asked them what they needed.
Yeah.
And we gave them money to do what they needed. And we're not, it's just an example of like when one senior center wanted solar panels and another senior center wanted a generator. That was their choice on what they needed. But this is to help them really get their plans in place for more funding.
And to tie all of that together. So maybe they got solar panels and they didn't really, we don't really have enough money for the battery backup. So that'll be identified in the plan.
So stop me if I'm outside of the scope, but I just think it's something that I don't feel is in existence, and that's MOUs to understand what is, what can be done when we need them, what is approved for them. I just feel like we go with the closest one and try to figure out how to make it happen, but there's not a specific MOU to understand what are the responsibilities and roles of each individual. So I hope as we move forward to make this a little bit more permanent, a little bit more planned, rather than, I'm not going to say it's random, but depending on the emergencies, we have to pivot with what's needed for the community to continue to be served appropriately. But I feel like we have a lot of handshake deals or a lot of approved conversations that, yes, that's what we're going to do. But I'd love to see us end up with MOUs with some of these individual sites in the long run, especially as we're supporting them to get some of the funding to make some of the changes that we're going to be asking them to make.
Well, that's the legwork that we've been doing right now. And that is the goal. And that's why we're finding out, okay, you're a senior center, you can only do this. Okay, you can do this, you can do this. And so, we need to get all that laid out. We need to have those understandings, and then we'll be moving into our strategic plan and MOUs.
Right, and to figure out where the gaps are, when you look at Clear Lake Oaks, if the senior center there can only serve seniors, then we know that we need another facility. We need to identify something else for the residents.
Which is how we got
The Boys and Girls
double
Club.
booking here in Middletown.
Yeah, so obviously, we already at the casino are a shelter, we have the resources through, we have our MOUs with Red Cross, PG&E, we have another facility downtown that we're looking anyway, it's right downtown. Obviously, a mile out of town is a little challenging for some folks. For us, we just put it up as, hey, we're moving in this direction anyway, we'll be part of the conversation. We have no problem signing an MOU down the road on that aspect to move it forward. But we're already putting in grants, and this will help organizations like the Tribe to go get other pots of funding, because they're really looking for that community collaboration. And so for our building, which is the Boys and Girls Club now, that's how it came to fruition in our conversation. And it's right downtown. So it just makes sense that we continue that on. And we're having these conversations not only with the county at this time, but the other organizations we have agreements with out at the event center that we currently use. So that's Red Cross, PG&E. We're moving, whether it becomes part of this spoke, it's going to be there anyway. So we'll make sure that we finalize an MOU for that conversation once we get there. And I can only speak on behalf of our building for the Middletown Rancheria.
Thank you, and we're really, really excited that it's part of it because it's the only facility that specifically serves youth. So we want to learn from that and include that because it's an issue, families may not have a place to go when they need clean air because maybe the kids aren't allowed at the senior center. We don't know that yet, but we're going to find out. So thank you for participating.
And in the past, for multiple fires, especially the river and the ranch fires, it was a distribution center in the back of the house there for all the tribes, for air filters, many different things, the food packages, all that. The BIA reached out to us, and it just made sense when we started to have the conversation. We've already done this. We didn't have it written down, as you said, in the middle of a disaster. You just do what you got to do, and people call you, say, "Yep, facility is available. Let's get moving." So, it made sense to be a part of this too for our community.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, very thorough. Obviously, planning, first part of the process, where it all lands with our various senior centers and all that. It'll probably work itself out. What I saw in the Tuolumne County example were like fully realized CRC's, big deals, and successive rounds of grant funding for construction and stuff like that. So I don't think we're going to be able to shotgun that level of project around the county, but if our scoping and our planning drives us in that direction where we want like really full service CRCs like that example, that's one thing. If our community through this planning grant wants to fluff up our existing facilities to the extent possible, and I do notice there are some location restrictions on subsequent grant monies. So, but the only thing I really wanted to compliment staff on, even if it was a requirement of the application, was the commitment letter. And I just wanted to highlight that because this We have so many things going on in this county, and we contribute so much staff time and resources and stuff like that, and normally it falls under other duties as assigned. This breaks it out. This is exactly what we're doing in terms of supporting this effort. It's down to the dollars and cents. It's down to the FTEs, and I really appreciate the ability to track in real time what we are doing as a county, and getting that granular gives me assurance that we're being responsible stewards. That obviously is going to reassure the state folks handling this that we are committed, and we're putting that commitment forth. But for my interest as a manager, if you will, I like to see that level of commitment be quantified as opposed to, oh, here's another meeting we're going to go to. So I just wanted to compliment that. It may be just a simple one-page grant requirement that you did a one-off on, but I want to highlight that as an example of things I'm looking for in all these broad things that we support. But we do a great job getting the support out there and committing verbally to do these things. We don't do the best job all the time quantifying the level of that support. So I love this letter for that.
Yeah, and this is a requirement of Terry's grant. Mm-hmm. Okay, any public comment? Oh, one more comment from Supervisor Spatier.
Yeah, I just remembered that Ms. Logston said something about the RRA. I just kind of want to understand where the RRA's role is in all of this, or are they just kind of a recipient of the information of the planning process that you're going to be actively engaged in?
It's a great question. No, mostly a recipient of the information, but also the members of the RRA. I'm going to be soliciting their assistance and help in convening the community groups to give feedback and to work with the senior centers, because the members are all around the county. And so the advisory committee will be a subcommittee of the RRA, but it won't be like many of the subcommittees of the RRA won't be members of the RRA. They'll just give updates to the RRA, which then can come back to your board.
Okay. So we do, I'm going to open it up for public comment, and we do have Shannon Kimball off. All right, so you can go ahead and unmute and have 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple comments in terms of the strategy around having spoke around the lake. Because we have the lake in the center, as we all know, it can make travel difficult, especially in fire season when roads may be closed or in inclement weather. So the strategy is not to have these full-blown centers around the lake, as I think it was Supervisor Green that said, but more specifically that these hyper-local trusted partners that are already serving in communities, while they may not have the resources to be a full-blown center, the full-blown center can support them to do the work within their hyper-local community rather than forcing people out of their community into a single point of service. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I wanted to comment on is that part of the strategy of the American Red Cross in terms of the other partners that we're working with, whether it's Galilee Lutheran Church, because there are no community or senior centers within that geographic area, which is quite isolated and has a number of seniors who don't have reliable transportation. So in Galilee, that location was chosen specifically because there was not another option there. But then Kelseyville Presbyterian Church also was working on becoming a resilience hub. They have a youth dedicated building that they're a part of. And then there are organizations that we think of as being senior centers. For example, Lucerne Alpine Senior Center, but it is not owned as the county. I think it was Supervisor Crandall that pointed out the county owns the thrift shop, but not the building. So because they will not qualify for some of these county, state, and federal funds, because they are outside of that county structure, the Red Cross piece within this planning is that we are helping them to increase their capacity. So we're working with Lucerne Alpine Senior Center to get a generator switch, and we're working with them to provide an ADA accessible ramp so that people have easier access. So it's very, while this planning grant is the county plan, it really is a broader, holistic strategy for the entire community, not only for community-owned partners. So I just wanted to highlight that one piece as we were talking about how broad this planning really will be. And one of the questions that came up to me recently is why does it take so long for the planning grant? And I really wanted to emphasize, as Terry was saying, that the key to the strategy behind the Strategic Growth Council plan is that they are community-led. And so we want to make certain that we're not rushing this process and that we're really listening to the community and what it is that they want, both for the hyper-local centers, but also for this one large center that's going to be able to resource all the smaller ones. And that was it. Thank you.
Great. Perfect timing. Thank you, Shannon, for filling in the gaps that we might have missed. Okay, and then it looks like we've got a hand up. Betsy Kahn, can go ahead and unmute, and you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would just like to say that all of these special programs should be part of the update of the general plan and the area plans. And, that it's a very high priority for those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any other public comment? Not seeing any, so we will bring it back to the board for action.
Just a real quick follow-up question. It's just a question, because the way it's stated, and thank you for the clarification, Pastor Shannon. So the presentation on the Tuolumne side focused on kind of like fully realized things. Now that I'm reading the staff report, it does talk about maybe we could at best do one of those major ones and then support the spokes. And that's reasonable. That's a reasonable conclusion. So, but wouldn't a planning grant be, an open-ended planning grant would be, we can look at both those models. Like, for example, a central hub and feeding the spokes could be okay, but there could be physical and financial constraints with those various spoke locations. So I think, I just want to ask, like during the planning grant, we're not locked into one particular model. We may have some ideas, some broad brush ideas as lined out here, right? But we're not committed to any particular model as this initial planning grant unfolds, right?
No, the intent is to find out what each of the spokes need to be upgraded to be able to serve as a cooling center, warming, and when I say warming center, it's not an overnight, just a warming center and a clean air center. What do they need physically, financially, staffing-wise, volunteer-wise, and then to identify a location, as we're having these conversations, where would it make sense to have a standalone hub?
Okay.
Well, and also, this is the initial phase, and it can be augmented, and built on as we go. As I mentioned, Tuolumne is developing more, but you got to start somewhere. And you can't have too big of a plan where you can't get off the ground. So this is our initial plan. It is a planning grant, and we'll get through that, and then we'll apply for the next 2 levels to get to implementation.
And I'm really hoping to learn a lot from talking to the senior and community centers about their needs, because as you mentioned, there are other sites that I wasn't aware of that the county owns that could be. They just weren't identified in time, because this grant, we hope to apply on Friday. But we'll learn these things to know and make it easier as we go forward with other locations.
Supervisor Spatier.
2 things. Don't forget juvenile hall, if there's any way to implement them and how to upgrade with their needs, because they do offer that type of service already on a regular basis, but if we can enhance them during cooling and warming center, those who are experiencing homelessness would typically be directed there, just as another addition in that area. And then finally, on Friday, when you submit the app, if it's possible to send a copy of the application, because I think the details are not all right here in front of us. It's more of a prospective idea that's shared with us within this item, where the details within the grant are a little bit more specific as to who the partners are, what the expectations are, and so on and so forth.
Okay, we're ready for action. Yep.
It's a three-parter if
I
it's not.
think Vice Chair Simon's got it.
That's all right. I'll second it. Mike wants to go ahead.
All right. Move to approve the County of Lake to act as lead agency on the planning grant application under the Community Resilience Center's grant program from the California Strategic Growth Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'd like to offer the resolution.
Okay, Wendy, the resolution's been offered.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier, pardon me.
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And finally, I move to approve this most excellent commitment letter and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much.
You're killing it.
I'll be back again soon.
All right, great. Thank you.